Good afternoon, friends. It's Thursday, October 8th. Thursdays in Black, and time for a reflection. In 2011, Joan planned an anniversary celebration for my 30 years of ministry. My folks were here. My good friend Chuck came up. And Alex also joined us for the day. After worship, we gathered in the big room here at Shepherd of the Hills for a time of feasting and roasting. Joan, my mom, Chuck, and Alex all offered their words of enlightenment about my 30 years of ordained ministry. And I was asked to remain quiet, only given the opportunity to say thank you at the end. That was the direction I think I was given the night before. To be honest, I don't remember many of the words that Joan, Chuck, my mom, or Alex shared, but a few still rings in my mind. Like my mom calling me Bob for the first and only time in my life. Or Alex saying that he prepared his speech by watching SportsCenter because he said that's how I got my inspiration for sermons. Last weekend, Alex and I were reminiscing while I was down in San Jose working on The Getaway. And we covered a number of memories. And then he asked what I thought I would be doing this time next year. I said, easy. Loving retirement, traveling, spending time in The Getaway, maybe also spending time in Surprise, Arizona, my hoped-for getaway location. I also reflected on his comments about how I got ready for a sermon. There is some truth to his understanding. Although it was not watching SportsCenter, it was watching people, eavesdropping in conversations, listening to news, and reading. Now, I remember two very different conversations with seminary professors back in the day that changed my entire thought process. The first conversation was with Dr. Goebel, who specialized in the field of Christian education, and he did become one of my mentors. He challenged me one day as we were working together to quote, be a theologian, unquote. I told him no, that was not my desire. I intended to be the best parish pastor I could be. I had no desire to be a theologian like Dietrich Bonhoeffer or Karl Barth or Paul Tillich, three that we had been reading about all year long. I said that it seemed to me that theologians enjoyed the towers of education, and I really wanted to be in the field of the parish. Dr. Goebel shot me down when he asked, "Do you ever think about God?" "Of course I do," I responded. "Then," he said, "you are a theologian. A theologian is someone who thinks about God." Now, I honestly had never thought about that reality before. Dr. Thulin was my preaching professor, as well as an avid reader and media consumer. He offered a January term entitled Theological Reflection on the Novel. And I know that during that term in my second year at seminary, we read Night by Elie Wiesel, we read C.S. Lewis materials, and we read two other novels. Our class time was a more relaxed environment at a downtown pub where we, small group, talked about what we read and how our faith informed what we understood. It was Dr. Thulin who encouraged us to start using the images and messages of the books we read and including that into our sermons. So when my senior year came around and I was seeking one more class to finish out a full semester, I contacted Dr. Thulin and I asked if I could work on an independent study with him. He said yes, and what did I want to do? And I said, I want to use other media as a theological reflection springboard. He said yes, that sounded fun. And so he assigned me some movies, some TV shows, and music for me to digest and discuss. As we discussed those media selections, and we handled them in our academic conversations, he then gave me an assignment to write a sermon using the material in some form. He would assign me a biblical passage that he selected, And he said, use the text as the text for the sermon, and then set me free to go whatever direction I wanted. I recall the early attempts were not very good at all. I believe I was using a very large shoehorn to get the biblical text and the media piece to connect with one another. I still love the memory that Dr. Thulin never tore down my sermons. He rather always found something positive and asked me how I could build on that and make it more of a solid connection. One time I did ask him after a while, why don't you ever just say that's a really bad concept, and it's a bad sermon? You need to work harder at it, or just make that connection even clearer. He simply said, why? Would that help? I still remember those words, and I think about them as I interact with others. Would it help? I realize to this day how those two mentors have shaped my life as a pastor. The theologian in me challenges others to be theologians as well. Afraid to be one? Well, do you think about God? Do you wonder, where is God right now? Wonder what God is doing as we've been deployed for almost 7 months now? Do you wonder what God is thinking about? How have we been acting, living, sacrificing, serving, complaining for these months? Well, guess what? You're a theologian. You've been thinking about God. And you're a theologian right up there with the best of them, Bonhoeffer, Tillich, Barth, and Goebbels. And the preacher in me asks those annoying questions about how movies, books, music, and life inform the words we speak on behalf of God and Jesus. Did you notice the faith connection in the movie Hacksaw Ridge? I was recently asked. That led to a really incredible conversation. I was also having a conversation with a member of our small group called the Joy Book Club. We were talking about redemption and forgiveness, and I used my favorite play, Les Mis, and she responded by telling me about the book she was reading, Just Mercy. Now it's on my list to read. Media connecting with us, with our faith life. The power of that media to connect with our faith. The power of our faith to see the messages in those media pieces. So it's not Sports Center that has ever really informed my faith life or my sermon preparation, although, to be honest, I have heard some really amazing faith stories on Sports Center. You have to listen deeply for them. It's always, though, listening to the way God speaks to God's people today and being willing to think and speak with God. I have become a theologian, and you are one too. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. We're back in worship here at Shepherd of the Hills inside, as we've done live streaming. No parking lot worship this Sunday. But we will be celebrating communion, so have your elements ready for it. Remember, though, until then, and always, wash your hands a couple of times a day, 20 seconds at a shot. Stay home if you're not feeling well. Wear your mask, please, when you go out in public. Practice that important 6 foot physical distancing, unless you're with your family. And then, of course, get as close as you all can. Hug one another, love on one another, be connected to one another. And of course, as always, Sergeant Esterhaus says, be careful out there.